Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the launch of Equi's latest report, focusing on faith, family and care. My name's Francis Davis. I'm a Professor of Public Policy at the University of Birmingham and a Fellow at Kellogg College at the University of Oxford, and really pleased to be a Fellow of Equi, which I consider to be one of the most important social innovations happening in the British space at the moment. We've got a stellar panel who I'll introduce to you as we go, and we're going to be spending the next 90 minutes exploring this new publication and inviting you to make contributions and to respond to the panel that we've got with you. But I'm going to begin by inviting Professor Javed Khan, Managing Director of Equi, to introduce today and to scope out today's conversation. Javed.
Well, thank you very much, Francis, and thank you for chairing this session. And good morning, everybody. Delighted to welcome you all to this very important webinar. I'm just going to say a few words about Equi, and but not steal the thunder of the people who've done the work on the research. They will speak about that in due course. But Equi was established in September 2024, so we're still a very young public policy think tank in terms of the journey that we're on, and that journey is quite an ambitious journey. I mean, we established ourselves because we believe that there is a lack of diversity of insight in UK public policy development, and we want to make our contribution to that. We see ourselves as one cog in a very big wheel, so we're not attempting to do everything, but we are attempting to capture British Muslim insight in ways that we don't think has been done before, in order to influence the development of public policy that recognizes the insights from that work. So we're capturing that insight through a whole range of activities of detailed research, like you're going to hear, polling to capture the latest views of people, roundtables, focus groups, and a whole range of other things, and turning that into what we like to think is high quality research outputs. But research in itself isn't enough for us. We want to actually influence future public policy. So yeah, all of our research at the end has public policy recommendations, and we speak directly to government. So this isn't about a think tank that speaks to communities or community organizations. It's about focusing on central government, because that's where public policy is by and large developed, agreed, published, and then followed through. And within that, we believe that one of the gaps in UK public policy at the moment is an under recognition of the role of faith. So we believe that faith literacy is a really important ingredient in good public policy. And at the moment, that doesn't exist. We live in a country where once upon a time, somebody quite famous said, government doesn't do God. We think that's a weakness, not a strength. And our job is to convince the powers that be that that is the situation. And that's what we're trying to do. So as I say, capturing British Muslim insight, turning it into high quality research, good recommendations in terms of how public policy can be improved for the benefit of all British people. So it's not only one particular faith or community, but what's good for Muslims is actually good for everyone, because we're looking at the big issues of the day, like education, like housing, like children in care today, arts and culture, the environment, the justice sector, the really big, thorny issues that society faces anyway. And today's report is one very important milestone on that journey. It's a major report into a very major issue. So, and many of the people on the webinar will be familiar with the challenge of children in care. The numbers are growing uncontrollably. Over 107,000 young people in the UK are in care. It's 80-odd thousand just in England, and those numbers are growing year on year. This is creating huge challenge, not just for the young people who are in care, but also those agencies that are there to support them, because the budgets are out of control, because it's a demand-led budget. And anybody who's got anywhere close to local government in terms of children's services and how they need to respond will know how difficult that is, and how this conundrum has got to be faced head on. And many people have written many reports on it. And our contribution today is one further contribution on that journey, because we are looking at children in care, those on the edge of care, from a faith perspective. What role can faith play in reducing the children going into care and improving the outcomes for those already in care? We believe that there is something very important to be said here, and we believe that government needs to listen to the messages that are going to come out in this report.
I'm going to invite Jennifer Eggert, who is Director of Policy and Research at Equi, and Sophia Shah, who's been the lead researcher on this project now, to present us the findings and the recommendations of the report. Just to flag here that after our speakers, so we'll be having this presentation and then some responses from the paradigms of lived experience from experts. We'll be taking questions, and you'll be able to put your questions into the chat as we go. So Jennifer and Sophia, please fire away. Jennifer first, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much, Francis. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see so many of you here. So in terms of the rationale, the research for the report really started with the question of how can we provide better outcomes for children in care? The hypothesis that we set out to test was that Islamic living can, first of all, reduce the number of children going into care, and second, improve the quality and outcomes for those in care. Now, you've heard in Javid's overview that at Equi we produce research on public policy issues by drawing on British Muslim insights. So we examined this question by focusing on the experiences of British Muslims. That being said, the findings of the research, which really, as you will hear from Sophia, stress the importance of prevention, inclusion, contextualization. These findings are really relevant to all of us in the UK and not just Muslims. The research shows very clearly that faith is an overlooked factor in the care system, which Sophia is now going to speak more about.
Yes, so going into this report and looking at the intersection between faith, family, and the care system, we found that there simply isn't enough stringent and thorough research out there, and there's very little credible data sources that we could use. So we developed a stringent data collection strategy to tackle this. This all led to our report findings, of which I will present 7 key headlines across our wide-ranging report. And firstly, we found that 7 in 10 British Muslims feel a strong duty to support children in immediate and extended family. And we also found that British Muslims are 66% more likely to say their community provides informal care or financial support to families struggling. And we found that this creates essential safety nets within the community for families who are going through difficult times before they reach breakdown. And we find that British Muslims feel confident they are able to access direct and immediate support when they need it. And more importantly, they also feel like if anyone else in their vicinity needed that support, they would be happy to step in. And this creates huge benefits for the care system, because we found that despite 10% of under 18s in England being of Muslim heritage, in the care system, only about 4.8% are of Muslim heritage, which saves the UK government at least £223 million annually. And this means that all the safety nets we discussed previously are having tangible effects on keeping British Muslims out of the care system. We found that 2/3 of British Muslims feel a responsibility to help vulnerable children wherever they can. So this means that yes, they are taking care of children in their local communities, they are helping to take care of children in their extended and immediate families, but it actually goes further than that. They feel a strong commitment to help vulnerable children wherever they can, be that through global charities and generosity. And even in the care system, they are 63% more likely to consider fostering an adoption. So we find that these religious values are taken to have tangible benefits in their family, in their community, and even nationally in the care system as well. And as you can see, British Muslims are much more likely to very strongly agree with the sentiment that they have that personal duty to support vulnerable children wherever they can. However, despite this strong commitment, we find that there are several barriers to British Muslim carers that they face in the system. And our poll found that 59% of British Muslims would fear discrimination if they became care providers, compared to 34% nationally. And Secondly, we also found that a quarter of British Muslims cite the lack of cultural and faith matching as a barrier to carer uptake. And this sentiment we found was reflected in our interviews as well, where we spoke directly to potential carers, to carers themselves, and others leading in the sector. And one interviewee described it as like there's a tendency to assume that Muslim adopters or Muslim foster carers are hardline or rigid before they've even discussed faith themselves. And it's these elements of anti-Muslim prejudice or perhaps kind of a lack of faith literacy that means that a lot of Muslim potential carers are feeling a bit alienated, they're feeling discriminated against, which can lead to their possible unsuccessful applications. And one interviewee described it as quite disheartening. She said, it's almost as if they assume that because of our religion, our humanity is not existent, as if we would try and impose beliefs or practices on people around us indiscriminately. And at the end of the day, she found that quite distressing, as her faith is influencing her duty to support vulnerable children, and it's being treated as a barrier in the system. So we found that a lot of British Muslims, despite the strong commitment, it's almost being treated as if they don't want to talk about faith, which is a really distressing thing to hear. And not only is faith literacy important to these carers, to diversifying the pool of carers and as well as widening its numbers, faith literacy is essential to providing identity affirming care to children in the system. And our national polling found that faith was core to identity growing up for over 70% of British Muslims, as well as 40% of the general population. So when the care system fails to recognize how faith can be extremely important to a child's daily living, to their communal practices, to special festivities such as Eid or Christmas or Easter, or all these communal practices that are super important to their belief and their practices, ignoring this can leave children feeling isolated, alienated, and almost cut off from their communities. And this is why we find that faith literacy is absolutely integral to care reform, not only to carers and their ability to engage in the system, but also to the children in the system who deserve identity affirming care, so that their placements can provide stable, loving, and nurturing care to all aspects of their identity. And we find that there's been a lot of good work on recognizing culture and heritage, and we find that faith must also be part of this equation. And we will now go through all the policy recommendations we have come up with to ensure that faith literacy can be implemented in the most effective and feasible way possible. And I'll hand back over to Jennifer for this.
Thank you, Sophia. So in terms of the policy recommendations, next slide, please. There's a set of 4 recommendations that we would like to present to you. First of all, we recommend for faith literate practice to be promoted. The second set of recommendations, as you will hear in a moment, focuses on strengthening kinship care. We also recommend to focus on building the capacity and confidence of both current and potential carers. And lastly, we also recommend a focus on mobilizing the third sector and faith communities. So really strong focus on partnerships. So in terms of the first set of recommendations that focus on promoting faith literate practice, there's really 3 key areas that we would like to highlight here. First of all, it's really important to collect data on faith. So that's a recommendation for Department of Education to record faith alongside ethnicity. Secondly, there is a strong need for faith literacy training for social workers. So that's a call for the Department for Education, local authorities, Social Work England, and higher education providers to work together to address this need. And then thirdly, also a strong need for faith-sensitive therapeutic care and mental health services. Again, that's a recommendation for the Department for Education, but also for CAMS, to tailor existing mental health services to consider identity. If we then go on to the second set of recommendations, these focus on strengthening of kinship care. So kinship carers make significant contributions, really take off a lot of pressure of the formal care system, as you have heard in Sophia's presentation, but their work is not always fully recognized, and they're not always receiving as much support as they would need. So really two key recommendations here. And the first one is for the Department for Education and local authorities to provide financial, but also other types of support, for example, in the area of mental health services. And secondly, to also provide clear guidance. There's a real need for clear legal and financial guidance, access to legal aid in some cases, and this would significantly help build trust, reduce disruption for children, and ultimately also save costs to the state. Now, the third set of recommendation, as you can see on the slide here, focuses on building the capacity and confidence of carers, and that includes both current and potential carers. This is based on the findings of our research that showed that carers in general, and those of British Muslim backgrounds in particular, often did not feel that they were getting sufficient support. So key areas here, as you can see on the slide, are first of all a recommendation to offer tailored training and development support to carers. This includes the pre-assessment stage. So this would include both potential and current carers. Then also perhaps think about creative solutions, such as there's recommendation number 7 here on the slide, an investment in expanding homes, which would allow us to keep sibling groups together and address a lack of living space, which is a key concern for many potential carers. Our research indicates that following up on these recommendations would help increase the sufficiency and the diversity amongst fosterers, and would really also help save money in the long run. And then lastly, the first set of recommendation focuses on mobilizing the third sector and faith communities. We see significant potential here in terms of working together with the third sector and faith communities. We've put 4 key areas for your consideration on the slides here that collaboration could focus on. First of all, a key concern that kept on coming up in our research was support for caregivers. Obviously, young people's needs, they don't stop when formal foster arrangements come to an end, when they reach the age of 18. So we see significant potential here of working with, for example, the halal economy and the British Muslim philanthropic sector. Again, a strong recommendation to provide very clear guidelines and resources that are aimed at building strong partnerships between agencies, local authorities, and faith-based community organizations. A call to produce faith-sensitive training guidelines. The need for training on faith literacy has already come up. So this now is a call to set up a working group to work together with people with professionals from diverse backgrounds to co-produce training guidelines together. And then lastly, fourth recommendation in this area would be to also partner with third sector organizations to produce tailored awareness campaigns that highlight the need for fostering adoption in faith communities and some of the issues that fosterers face. In terms of, can you go one back? Sorry, thank you. In terms of the impact that we would expect to see from these recommendations being implemented is that our research shows very clearly that mobilizing the third sector and faith communities would really allow us to tap into networks and resources that are currently not fully used, which would ultimately benefit children in care as well as those looking after them. So if we move, thank you, Sophia, to the final slide in this section, just to reiterate 4 sets of recommendations. The first one focused on promoting faith-literate practice. Secondly, is a real need to strengthen kinship care. Thirdly, we recommend to focus on building the capacity and confidence of current and potential carers. Really taking the barriers that people face serious rather than turning people away or alienating them in the process. And then fourthly, really also focusing on mobilizing the third sector and faith communities and building long-lasting partnerships that benefit first of all children in care, but then ultimately also the rest of us, the rest of society. So with that, I hand back over to Francis.
So I'm going to invite now Mohammed Bashir to share some of his experience about working in this sector. Mohammed's a registered manager at ACS Fostering, where he's repeatedly won excellent ratings from CQC, which, having done that in the NHS, I know is sometimes miraculous and sometimes a sign of sheer brilliance. So congratulations. Very, very experienced and an award-winning contributor in this space. And so, Mohammed, over to you to share your insights, experience and thoughts.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Firstly, I want to begin by thanking Equi as an organisation in terms of doing this research, and I think it's become absolutely imperative that we keep this to the fore. My background is I'm a social worker of over 20 years, and fostering and adoption is something that's very close to my heart. And the reason I came into this field was on the back of my experiences in child protection and also being an independent social worker for a number of years when I was undertaking special guardianship assessments and kinship assessments, particularly with families where faith is absolutely integral. And I remember many families saying to me, well, if the child Mohammed can't be with us, can you please make sure that they are with a foster parent who follows the same faith as us? And unfortunately, I'm going back now over 15 years, nearly 20 years. I'd often say to them, look, I'm really sorry, I can't promise you that. I will make that an integral part of my recommendations. And I wish I could promise you that, unfortunately, I can't. And on the back of that, I decided, you know what, I need to get into fostering and try to actively do something. Fast forward Active Care Solutions, we're part of the Polaris group, and the whole essence of Active Care Solutions was to have an agency where faith was at the core of what we do and not be embarrassed about it. That was the other thing when I first came, and people would kind of wishy-washy around it. And I said, actually, hold on, we need to be open and say, look, this is who we are. We're here to meet a specific need for children from these backgrounds. However, it doesn't mean that we're not there for children who don't follow a faith. And we do have children placed with us who don't follow a faith. And it's been enlightening for them learning about other cultures and so on. I think the issue for me that has a big impact is we possibly live in a society where faith is not at the core of the beliefs of many of the professionals that I work with. There's an acknowledgement about faith, but faith for them, if they're not practicing Christians or Muslim, isn't a part of their day-to-day life. And I think it then automatically seeps into their thinking because they don't see it as a priority. If you see the Children Act 1989, it talks about faith, but it doesn't give it that importance. It speaks more about acknowledging that a child has a faith. Whereas I truly believe, I wish the Children Act would put it down as that it's an essential part of a child's matching when they're placed into foster care. So in terms of our journey at Active Care Solutions, to begin with, we had to promote fostering amongst faith communities, and many communities that we worked with, predominantly Pakistani Muslim, Black Christian foster parents, and also European foster parents of a faith background. They weren't actually aware of fostering as a potential career for them, something that they could offer. We did a lot of promotional work, and we've been very, very positive in terms of recruiting carers from those communities. In terms of children that have come to us, they've had such a positive experience that they're with foster carers where they don't have to explain about their diet, they don't have to explain that they have to fast, they don't have to explain that they pray, they don't have to explain that they go to church at the weekends, they don't have to explain about Easter, why it's important for them. And I think that alone has really, really helped children to settle. As a result, what then happens is the placement, and I don't like using the word placement, it's like talking about a child as if they're a number, but the child then more than likely will not have a breakdown, because each time a child has a breakdown with a foster parent, it adds, to the anxieties and traumas that they've always been through. And we've been very fortunate. Many of the children that have lived with us have gone on to independent living, and some of them are still involved with us through a volunteer basis in terms of raising the profile about fostering. So that positive impact alone has, for me, been worthwhile for Active Care Solutions. This report, I think, has come at a very ideal time for, say, myself as a Muslim. Unfortunately, ever since 9/11, we get a lot of negative press, and our foster carers as well. They often speak about about faith and being in meetings where they feel like people are skirting around faith, whereas we're pushing our foster parents to say, actually, hold on, be proud of who you are and talk about your impact as a Christian or a Muslim foster carer and the impact that you've had on the children, as that impact will stay with that child for all their life. So the trauma that they've been through that few years of living with our foster parents, hopefully, reduces the impact of that trauma, and they have a connection, because the faith is an absolute core of their identity. Many of our children might be called Muhammad, for example. My name is Muhammad Bashir. So automatically when people hear my name, they associate me with the Muslim faith. Likewise, the children that come to us, they say, well, I am who I am. And, why aren't people helping me to put faith at the forefront rather than make it look like they're doing me a favor? So I think this report has moved it to that professional shift in an acknowledgement about the impact that faith has on children, has on Muslims and people of other faiths as well. So I think it's absolutely invaluable for me. And I really want to thank Sophia, who first reached out to me, and having the opportunity to speak about it. Now I'm very passionate about it. It's something that's very close to my heart, and not just Islam, but embracing people of all faiths and having the opportunity to give children a positive, life-lasting experience with them.
So I'm now going to turn to Sharma Jung, and Sharma is a connected persons foster carer in Southwest London. She produced the Islam channel documentary, Please Can I Have a Mummy and Daddy, highlighting the experiences of Muslim heritage children in care, has made many other contributions to recruitment drives, advising social workers, improving cultural competence. And we're really delighted and honoured to have you here today, Sharma, to share your experience. So over to you.
Thank you. And thank you to Equi for inviting me to speak. Yes, so I am a foster carer of a Muslim child, and interestingly, that relates to something Sophia has said earlier about preventing children entering into care in the first place. I came into fostering this child as a result of voluntary work I was doing, where the child was still in the care of their mother, and I served as a family support person. The mother had, in one instance, the mother had grown up in care herself and had converted to Islam and needed family support when she had nobody. And in the other instance, it was somebody who just had no family support whatsoever. And, with the first individual intervening and offering that family support meant that she was able to keep her child, and they're now thriving, and they're at school and doing brilliantly. but the other individual, sadly, the child wasn't able to remain with the mother, and the child came to me. So I was just interested in what you said, Spire, about perhaps finding ways of preventing Muslim children coming into care in the first place, and volunteering as family support people for often Muslim converts to Islam, or people who've gone through the care system themselves, and the cycle is repeating. Is just a side note, but I've just mentioned that now. But coming back to what I wanted to say, so yes, I have a historical involvement in advocacy around fostering and adoption, and Muslim looked after children that aligns with the work that Equi have now been doing. So for me, it's always timely. It's something that I was involved in from a long time ago, and I'm so delighted to see that this work's been happening. I first was completely ignorant about the fact that there were any Muslim children in the care system until I heard of a story of a little boy called Talha, and I was shocked to know that Muslim children were even in the care system. And that sparked a need in me to do a documentary to find out about the situation for Muslim looked after children. And the very first obvious thing that the viewers would want to know is, what is the scale of the issue? How many Muslim children are looked after, in the care system? How many of them need adopting or permanency? And at the time, the Department for Education only kept information on the ethnicity of children, and I understand that to still be the case. So I'm so pleased that one of the policy recommendations by Equi has been to keep data based on faith, where a lot of the terminology could be advanced, such as the concept of transracial adoption is the closest you can get to talk about a child who's been placed, a Muslim child by birth who's been placed out of faith. There isn't even a term for trans faith adoption, for example. So as far as the documentary was concerned, I had the opportunity to interview individuals who are now adults, who were born to Muslim parents and grew up in non-Muslim households, where the argument, love is enough. There was no shortage of love and care, but and they had good lives. But one individual said that now that he wanted to connect with his birth family, he had children of his own now, he wanted to meet his birth mother, but because he had no knowledge of Islam whatsoever growing up, he was intimidated and having adverse kind of it had an adverse psychological impact on him. He felt that he would offend his mother, offend his birth family, and the production team, he asked us to give him a crash course in Islam so that he could feel, he could have the confidence to meet with his family. He very much felt trapped between two worlds, not properly fitting in with either world. Another individual we interviewed, she said that there was no reference to Islam really growing up. She had been, she had Muslim parents, but she loathed the skin she was in. She hated herself for the fact that she knew that she had a Muslim heritage, and that her only experience about Islam was what she would hear in the media about terrorism. So she hated herself for that. And I think that's really tragic and really sad. Had she been brought up in a Muslim family, she would have had a healthy narrative around Islam, hopefully, and wouldn't have had to suffer those effects. Obviously, where there is a shortfall of Muslim adopters, Muslim carers, that's another issue. But my experience in doing the documentary, one of the episodes was called "Losing My Religion," and I found a number of reasons why Muslim children were not being placed within faith where potentially they could be, and faith literacy and cultural competency were one of the reasons why you often had Muslim children placed with, for example, a Hindu family on the basis that, well, they're brown. The interagency fee was another issue where a local authority may not widen the search to look for a better match using the National Adoption Register, because they're restricting their search to their own pool of adopters because they didn't want to incur that fee. And I know this was something that the Department for Education, Tim Lawton at the time, was critical of, because it caused, not from the faith perspective, but it caused delays in making placements. So that was an area that I was very interested in, that, you know, where there are Muslim people waiting on the adoption register, why is a Muslim child not being placed with them? Because of budgetary concerns. And I do remember Tim Lawton's report saying that, you know, budgetary concerns should not restrict local authorities from looking you know, further afield for a better match or a best match. The cultural competency of social workers, I felt, was another barrier where, you know, through my work with, I was part of BAF's BME committee, so I was receiving lots and lots of inquiries from social workers conducting assessments on Muslim foster carers and adopters, Muslim prospective adopters and foster carers going through the process. I was hearing from both sides. I was hearing from panel where there was a query on you know, something to do with Islam. So this, the fact that Equi are, you know, highlighting the need for training around cultural competency, around faith literacy, I think is really, really important, right from the social work university level, you know, coming in very early to get that kind of training in place. I think it is really key in terms of my own journey with the child. After everything I'd learned, you know, when I had the opportunity to give this child permanency within my own home, I absolutely jumped to it. I see her learning Muslim prayers and being proud of the fact that she knows this prayer and that prayer, and I can see how this will imbue resilience in her for the challenges she's got to face in the future. I remember Professor Julie Selwyn saying to me, because she was one of the key advisors on my on the documentary, I remember her saying that faith does imbue resilience to children for the challenges that they're going to face around identity and so on. Thank you.
That's really helpful and interesting and useful insights. Thank you very much. I think this question of cultural competency and religious literacy, I think, will be something that we can explore some more. Lest any social worker on the call feel like that's just an issue for your profession. I mean, the Foreign Office at the moment has a programme of developing religious literacy across all of its policy fields as well. So I think we're gnawing away here maybe a generic public service set of challenges which have local applications. So thank you very much indeed for that contribution, Sharma. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Krish Kandaya. Krish grew up in Sussex, but's gone on to make a global contribution in the child protection, fostering, family and care sector. He's the former chair of the Adoption of Special Guardianship Leadership Board, founder of the Global Children in Care Summit. He's on the faculty at Regent's Park College in the University of Oxford, and going to invite Krish now to respond to what he's heard so far, both from the report and from the shared lived experience. So great to have you with us, Krish.
Thank you, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations to Equi. This is a really important report, and I'm so glad that you've done it. Let me share a little bit of my story and see if that kind of helps put some of this into kind of personal context. So my wife and I have been foster parents for the last 18 years. During the fostering assessment process, our faith was initially seen as a blocker or a challenge. We were told by numerous social workers, not just in our local authority, but in my later life running a fostering and adoption charity, that when faith is mentioned, it's like a red flag for social workers, that it immediately puts them on the back foot. And we found that in our experience of becoming foster parents. It was almost like they couldn't see the benefit that we as Christians could bring, that our faith was the motivating factor. It was the resilience, as we just heard from Sharma, behind our motivation. And our faith community, our church, was the wraparound support that we needed in order to keep going. But it was red flagged, and that was problematic. We have, over the last 18 years, fostered children from a range of backgrounds. Some of them had no faith affiliation, some were Muslim. That meant some quick study from us. We know a little bit about Islam through our friends, but suddenly we were aware that the little town that we lived didn't have very good food provision. So we all had to become vegetarian because there was no way to get halal meat. But what we found from the birth parents of the children that we were fostering was when they found out that we were people of faith, they were relieved. They said the people of faith can understand that faith is really important to us, and therefore, of course, it would have been great to have Muslim carers, but actually, at least you value faith, you recognize that faith is important, and that we found to be very encouraging. I launched a fostering and adoption charity trying to inspire Christians to come forward. It was called Home for Good. And I think some of your research tells you that faith is overrepresented in one sense. People of faith are likely to be open to fostering and adoption. For the Christian faith, it ties into essential core teaching of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. You want to model his kindness and compassion to everybody. And so it's a delight for us. We weren't just trying to look after our community, we were trying to look after any child that was in need. But as I got into trying to train and inspire Christians to come forward, I was worried about those red flags. And so we started to do faith literacy training, originally just to help local authorities and adoption agencies, but it ended up becoming a kind of wider initiative. And at some stage we partnered with my foster family, and I hear Shams is on the call. Shads is on the call. Glad to hear that you're recovering well. And what we found when we were able to do it live, I used to have a little exercise involving post-it notes, and I said, this is completely anonymous. What I want you to do is I'm going to give you 3 post-it notes in pink, 3 in blue, and 3 in yellow. And I just want you to tell me the first words that come into your mind, and make it a describing word, an adjective, when you hear these different groups. And so the first group we asked people to write down about were Christians. What's the first thing that comes into your mind when you hear Christians? And then, I don't know if you're old enough, friends, to remember Top Gear. And there used to be a cool wall, ultra cool, not cool, across a kind of spectrum. And so we kind of recreated this cool wall, and we said, okay, if you have a positive post-it note, I want you to put it on this side. If you got an ambivalent post-it note, put it in the middle, and if you got a negative one, put it on the far left. And I would read them out and ask the group to decide where we would put it. So it was a kind of joint activity. And for Christians, you'd get things like Bible. And I said, well, that's not really an adjective. Let's put that in the middle of ambivalent. But I think probably around 70% of the comments were negative. They would be like hypocritical, misogynist, anti-gay. Those were the kind of perceptions that people had when I said the word Christian. 70% negative, maybe 20% ambivalent, and maybe 10% positive. And then we do the same exercise for Islam. What's the first word that comes into your mind when you hear the word Muslim? And I'm so sorry, this is what people would say when they knew it was an anonymous mechanism. Jihadi, suicide bomber, wife beater. It was 80% negative comments, 10% ambivalent, mosque community, and then 10% positive. And then we'd do it for atheist. And for atheist, you'd get probably 70% positive comments, rational, intelligent, kind, philanthropic, and then maybe 10% ambivalent and 10% negative. And I asked the group to look at this wall, and you'd have it kind of very visibly mapped out, pink post-it notes for Christians, blue post-it notes for atheists, yellow post-it notes for Islam. And I'd say, how do you feel about this wall? And I said, well, that's the way it is. I said, okay, imagine that instead of telling you religious affiliation, I'd told you another factor. I'd only given you one word, and you've built this kind of mental picture about the people we're talking about. Imagine that I'd said black, and 80% of the comments were negative. What would you call that? That would be racist, wouldn't it? Yes, that's right. Or what about LGBT? Oh, that would be kind of homophobic. But what about if you have a negative assumption because of someone's faith? What do we call that? And we didn't have a specific word for that. And so that was part of the problem. So I think Sophia, you mentioned many people from the Muslim community. It's true in Christian communities and other communities are nervous they won't be treated well by the system. And often that lack of literacy and actually that hidden prejudice is just not talked about. And therefore there are these fearful reactions because it's reality. And what happens when someone has a bad experience in the recruitment process is it doesn't just impact that family. The word spreads throughout the community. You really can't come forward as a foster parent or adopted parent because they'll treat you badly. Now, this isn't to say every social worker is like this. This is just our experience training social workers around the country. And we've had fantastic experiences with social workers too. And actually, there are Christian and Muslim social workers who get it. And that's fantastic. But we have a problem. And as Professor Francis has said, it isn't just in the social work category, but it's where it kind of comes to the fore for our conversation. So I think we really do need the work, particularly that you're talking about in terms of faith literacy within the system, within the recruitment system. And recruitment really matters at the moment because I'm someone that's, as all of you, I'm sure, we're passionate that we help children who've had the most difficult starts in life get the support and love and care that they need. And because we have a fostering recruitment and retention crisis, many children who should be in a fostering context are actually in an institutional care home instead. And we all know that the outcomes for children in those care homes are far worse, and particularly when it was their plan to be in family-based care. So this really matters, and I'm really grateful for this report. There's an urgent need within the system, and I think anything we can do to unlock the potential compassion and kindness of different faith communities, whether they're Christian, Muslim, LGBT, Black communities, whatever we need to do to unlock this is absolutely urgent and important. So thank you for this work.
Thanks very much, Dr. Krish. It's a clarion call to unlock the potential of the faith communities in this sector, and I think that runs through the report as well. So thank you very much for that contribution. I'm going to throw it open now to some questions. We have some questions emerging in the chat already. One I'm going to deal with quite quickly, which is where someone's saying, how can I help Equi and get involved in Equi's work? I'm going to suggest that you email to Professor Javed Khan and the team afterwards and have a conversation with them, and I'm sure your time contributions will be welcome. Our next question is, what role do you see for community or faith-based organisations in supporting statutory care, and how can partnerships between these groups and local authorities be strengthened? So I'm going to ask the team to comment on that, and then I'm going to ask Krish to comment on that briefly as well from his perspective. So Sophia, is that you? Yeah.
Yes, so yeah, that's something that's been super important to our recommendation. So one of those was to build a working group that includes members of the British Muslim third sector, members of the British Muslim fostering and adoption community, as well as the directors of care from local authorities and the government, to ensure that this partnership is being leveraged in a way that voices from the communities are able to represent themselves rather than being represented kind of in an abstract way. In terms of how local communities can engage with their local government to provide the statutory care, it's really important that, first of all, they collect that data on faith as we recommended, and then in an anonymized way, they might be able to share that with faith communities and say, look, we've got X number of Muslim heritage faith children that we are unable to place, and in the future, if we were to leverage local communities to actually get involved, in what ways can we ensure that there are suitable families to support them in matching and in support and as being part of the community as well. So we really encourage local authorities to engage with their local communities, their local mosques, their local churches, their local volunteering groups and everything that are often faith driven by faith values, to engage with these communities, to actually show we understand from our side that there are X number of children in care, or there are X number of unmatched children. We understand from your side, you have the drive and the dedication to support these children. How can we do this? So we really recommend there to be that direct representation in local communities and in working groups as well in the Department of Education.
And Krish, would you like to add to that?
Oh yeah, I'll try and be brief because there's so many brilliant ways that this can work. So for us as foster parents, when we brought our first foster baby home, that the church kind of reached out and embraced us. And they said, look, we normally only do this for newborn babies, natural born babies, but we will include you. And so every day at 5 o'clock, someone from the church would turn up at our house with a casserole. And they said, look, we realize it's tough, welcoming a new child into your household. So the way we're going to stand with you is just to help you feed your family, right? Not because we were poor, but just because we were time poor. That made a huge difference. When we had children with disabilities, particularly learning difficulties, the church tried to learn Makaton so that there was a community of people that would be able to communicate with these children, so they had that kind of wider support. We've seen churches, for example, in Southampton when we first got going, the city network of churches decided that they wanted to meet the needs of the local community. So they went to see their council. The council said, we need 40 more foster carers. So the churches said, right, we're in, like, we will try and find you all 40 of them together. And they made that their target. Every time a new foster family would come forward, churches would celebrate, say, right, 1 down, 39 left, 38 left, 37 left. So there's a way you can really capture the imagination of the faith communities. And you say, look, your faith is a benefit. We value it. It's a blessing. Rather than being seen as a threat. And I think if we embrace this, we can unlock that potential that we talked about earlier from right across different communities.
That's very, very exciting. And I'm reminded there of Harvard Kennedy School of Government has a wonderful case study called the One Church, One Child Adoption Strategy that everybody ought to go and look at. And I'm aware that in Southampton, Abu Bakr Mosque, for example, has been learning from that experience of the local churches and having conversations about one child and supporting the fostering campaign of the city council. We have a question about whether there might be a way to develop a network of carers and professionals with lived experience. I'm presuming there in the Muslim community and across the Muslim sector and beyond. And I wonder if the team would like to comment on that or how that might be done. And then maybe Sharma's got a view on how that might be well done. So Sophia or Jennifer?
Yeah, so there are loads of great organizations that already exist, such as My Foster Family, such as Active Care Solutions, and also the BME aspect of Quorum Bath. I think they have a dedicated faith-centered community group as well. So what our report really tried to do is actually platform groups that are already doing good work, but are sometimes eclipsed by these negative narratives that the public are often more bombarded with. So we found that, there are loads of great work going on, run by dedicated individuals that I'm sure would be very willing and open to take in and discuss these ideas with as many people from faith backgrounds as possible. And yeah, Sharma, if you have anything to add on that front as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, the work that My Foster Family have been doing, the engagement that they do at a level, at a community level is, absolutely outstanding. And I just wanted to add something to the question previously about, Muslims engaging with a local authority or with fostering and adoption. One of the experiences that I had was around part of the targeted recruitment we were doing. We did an event at a mosque inviting the Muslim community to come and learn about fostering and adoption. And I'm not going to name any local authorities at all, but we invited 2 local authorities to come in and do their pitch and talk about fostering and adoption. But we were viewed with a lot of suspicion at the time. One local authority said, we'll come, but don't tell them who we are. Don't mention our borough by name, because there's some worries. So they came and did their pitch without saying who they were. But towards the end, they were very happy and, trust was built. And then they handed out their literature with their forms for recruiting, which had their borough all over it. So that was good in the end. But another borough that I called to say, you're a local borough to the mosque. Would you like to come and talk about fostering adoption? They said, oh, well, we don't want Muslims. We only have really predominantly white children. So we don't want And this was recruitment. This was the person to call through the website for recruitment into fostering specifically. So I wrote a letter to that local authority about my views. Having been being a member of BAF's BME committee, I knew how to word that letter as well. And I got a phone call on Sunday saying, you know, the Director of Children's Services needs to see you urgently. Lots of apologies. And, you know, it's interesting because on the other hand, where some boroughs do targeted recruitment, they do ad campaigns. You know, we have Muslim children needing Muslim come forwards, you know, and when Muslim people have gone forwards, which I also did when I did go to heed that call and say, oh, here I am, I can foster any child, you know, irrespective of their background, but I have particular skills around Muslim children. I'm a Muslim person, and I got slapped down for discrimination. So you know, the arm isn't talking to the leg. So on the one hand, you've got these ad campaigns, and then when you go into the recruitment, you know, so on the one hand, you know, Muslims, you know, that response that I had, you know, from that recruitment person, that we don't want Muslims for white children. But on the other hand, if I'm highlighting Muslim children, then I'm discriminating against white children. So it's a kind of a mixed message. So that was, and I was working in the field as a volunteer, and I thought, if I was a Muslim individual in the public who'd gone forwards and said, oh, you know, I'm a Muslim and I'd like to help support Muslim children in the care system, and they're told, well, there's a lot of concerns about your, you know, your comments around discrimination, that would just be so off-putting, you know. So that was just something I wanted to raise. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, so far, we've been focusing on quite a lot of detail and detailed recommendations and detailed actions, but there's a big question here, which is picking up on societal narratives, which touches on what Chris mentioned, but on wider concerns I know that people will have on the call. How do the panel think that we might be able to address some of those misconceptions when you focus that onto the culture of care and encourage a more open and positive public debate? And going to invite the panel, and Chris, maybe you could say something about how that could be done across communities, because you drew those themes out as well. So would Jennifer or Sophia like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So one thing we tried to focus on going into this report is, we know those narratives are out there, and we know that it is largely negative. The most important thing we can do is actually platform some of the countless stories and countless everyday heroes that provide such crucial and life-changing, transformative care for so many children out there who are just being completely eclipsed by these narratives. So, for example, we spoke to one foster carer named Andrea Hunt, and she has been fostering for over 27 years for over 100 children during her time. And she spoke to me about taking in this Afghan Muslim heritage child was placed with her. He was a teenager at the time. And she said when he came in, he was very reserved. All the social workers said, we haven't seen him smile once. He's very quiet. We don't know how to get through to him. And just by respecting him and understanding his faith and understanding the space he needs, and not making him explain every single little thing that he needs to do, within a few days in her care, he was smiling, he was much more relaxed, he was engaging with her. And that was about 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And since those 3 weeks in her home, he's been messaging her good morning, good night every day since then. And she was the first person he could actually connect to in the care system. And it's stories like that I find are just so important into encouraging more positive public debate, because we just don't hear narratives like this enough. And one thing that the Muslim community can do is perhaps create an award ceremony or create awards for these kind of carers, and not just the Muslim community, but the wider care organizations, even community organizations, local groups and national groups. You know, there are so many things that should be platformed that simply aren't. So rather than constantly giving attention to the negative stuff, actually maybe it's about creating space for some of those positive stories too.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm sorry, I've got to jump off again. I think there's an internal and an external thing that needs to happen. So one is internally, we need to get our own house in order, that the local authority needs to embrace the value of faith. And we've seen local authorities transform in their thinking. It wasn't that long ago that if you were LGBT, you weren't welcome to be part of the fostering team. That there was a prejudice there. They overcame it, and now we're more inclusive. Amazing. So, you know, what would it take to have a similar kind of transformation internally with our own kind of prejudices and unconscious bias? Secondly, externally, I think we need to be able to recognize and celebrate that. So, you know, I was told by one social worker, again, brilliant social workers are out there, I'm just giving you the negatives to kind of make a point, that, you know, it's all right for you to be a Christian, just make sure you hide it from the children. Right? If a child comes to live in your home, just don't mention anything about your faith, because that will be imposing your faith on the child. I said, I don't want to impose anything on my child or the children that are coming to live with me, but I can't switch off being a Christian, right? I don't have that switch, just like I can't switch off being brown or being a man. It's part of my identity. So, you know, we celebrate the diversity on billboards and in advertising when it comes to gender and sexuality and recruitment for fostering, but we kind of play down the faith bit because that's a bit embarrassing. So could you celebrate it? Could you, when you have your fostering recruitment, can people talk about their different backgrounds and say, look, visibly you are welcome here, we want you in the system, because these children in our cities and towns, they're all of our responsibility. We want every community to come forward and play their part, because that's the kind of society that we need to live in. We are facing some really, really challenging narratives, and lots of things are getting overlaid at the moment, particularly around immigration. I'm still coming to terms with Keir Starmer mentioning that we live in an island of strangers, and it's because of all these immigrants who don't learn English. So this social cohesion question is now being lumped onto it's because of the immigrants that we're not getting along anymore. Well, why can't we in our advertising and our local authorities demonstrate actually we need and want everybody to come together for the flourishing of our society, and everybody's welcome to make their contributions? So I think there's a way we can push against these xenophobic, racist, Islamophobic, anti-Christian, whatever narratives by modeling something very different. That's surely part of the kind of nation that we want to live in.
Thank you very much. And if we lose you before we get to thanks, can I just thank you for your contribution today, Chris? It's been fantastic to have you with us. Javed Khan, can I just ask you to make a few comments really about that societal narratives challenge? I know you're part of an important commission that was announced yesterday with support from the leaders of all the major parties, and that this is a key concern of Equi. So
yes, happy to, Francis. I mean, I think, you know, not to overstate the challenge, you know, I think the country is at a really critical inflection point. Really, when you think about all of the winds that are blowing at the moment, whether in this country or us being influenced by what's going on in other countries, we have to make some important choices as a society, and our government has to show some very strong leadership, I believe, that unifies communities, brings them together in terms of celebrating what binds them, as opposed to the divisive rhetoric that can divide them. And so I think we're at a critical juncture, really. But connected to what we've been hearing today, I mean, from my point of view, this piece of work, this research that has been brilliantly presented by Sophia and Jennifer, is not a request for a sympathy vote from politicians or local authorities or social services. This is not a request to bring faith into politics per se. This is a business case that has been set out for how we can make a contribution to solving a long-standing conundrum in supporting really vulnerable children. And the case is that if we have greater regard to their faith as a key component of a response that recognizes who they are, recognizes what matters to them, that may be the inspiration for them to feel a greater sense of identity, confidence, self-worth, it may actually improve their life chances in a way that isn't happening at the moment. And that will save hundreds of millions of pounds to the taxpayer today, and possibly much, much more in the lifetime of those young people in terms of their future life chances. Now, that is a very strong business case that I think this research presents, and that's how it needs to be viewed. that if, as a country, as a society, our government, our local governments, and all the people that are interested in looking out for vulnerable children, if they really want to see improvements, then faith is one ingredient to the solution. It doesn't solve everything, and I don't think that this report presents it that way, but it's a very important ingredient. If we get that right, you know, the old adage of today's children are tomorrow's adults. All of us at some point will be relying on the life chances that are created for today's children, because we will be dependent on how successful they will be in their lives, how confident they feel, the contribution that they make, how economically prosperous they're going to be, when we will be dependent on them as pensioners in our own time, if we get that far. So it matters to us and it matters to society in that way. It's not a request for sympathy. Now, I'm optimistic that we have a government that wants to listen. It is looking for ideas to solve long-standing problems. And that is the bones of why Equi exists. We want to take not just problems to government, but we actually want to offer solutions. And I think this report offers that.
So I think that's a very powerful call to invest in the British Muslim community, to save money for the good of the whole country, and to be able to drive social innovations across the whole community that come from that community as a laboratory for what's good in society. And it's good to hear that you're optimistic as well that the government wants to listen, because that means that today's seminar is the beginning of opening some doors to drive that forward. So it just remains for me now to say some thank yous. I want to thank Mohammed and Sharma for sharing their lived experience, Krish for being here today, the Equi team who've done so much work to make this possible. So Sophia and Jennifer, and supported by Sinan Siech, and all of those who are doing the tech in the background. Thank you very much for the quality with which that's been done. But most of all, I want to thank those of you who've joined us today to hear the detail of this report. I hope you'll read it in all of its detail and share it with your networks. And we look forward to you joining us again at a future Equi event, and learning more and contributing more to the work of this amazing new think tank on the British scene. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today.